Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're going to show you two things. First is the spatial data that we mapped that shows how heat risk concentrates within the Borough of Hounslow.
And secondly, we'll be showing you how we've used that data to create better quality environments for people and for nature.
But why have we done this? Well, we know all too well the damage and risk that heat poses to our communities in the borough. If you cast your mind back 4 years ago, it's the summer of 2022, and there was an extraordinary heat wave, or number of heat waves across the UK. What you might not know is that nearly 3,000 people died during that period across the UK. The highest temperatures recorded were at Heathrow Airport, which, if anyone knows Hounslow, that's essentially at our doorstep, and that was 40 degrees. But in Hounslow, we had no idea of where our most vulnerable residents were, and we had no real holistic system in terms of addressing the challenge that heat poses as the climate crisis accelerates. But for those who don't know Hounslow, we are a borough in the outer west of London. We've got Ealing to our north, as well as Hillingdon and Richmond to our south. We stretch from sort of the leafy suburbs of Chiswick down to Feltham in the west. We are also a growing borough. Over 300,000 residents live in Hounslow. We are one of the most linguistically diverse populations in London, and we're particularly young in our demographic, so a third of people are aged under 25. As a council, we're committed to a greener and healthier borough, and data really underpins those values because, as is often the case in local government, you have a set of finite resources and you often have to target those interventions to people or places in need first. And heat risk is a really good example of that problem because we know that vulnerability is not evenly distributed across the population. Rough sleepers, people who are elderly, people who have mental health conditions like schizophrenia are particularly at risk when it comes to heat. They're more likely to be presenting with heat stroke or potentially fatal conditions during a heat wave. So in Hounslow, we developed a framework to understand both exposure to heat and sensitivity to heat. First, we created a heat risk index, so that captures variables from census data, but also our NHS patient data, looking at, say, people who have health challenges or specific respiratory conditions, as well as disability, and brings all of those things together to understand who's most sensitive to heat in the borough. And then we want to see, okay, which places are most exposed to heat. So we looked at satellite data, which looks at surface temperatures, air pollution as well, to understand how hot it actually gets on the ground. Both of those things together really give us a sense of how vulnerable it is in Hounslow to heat. We used two ArcGIS products, the Map Viewer and Experience Builder. The reason being is because we wanted a series of interactive maps that council teams could interrogate, but also we wanted one that was resident-facing to the public so that they could interact with as well. So I'll just walk you through what those look like. The first thing we did was create that heat risk index, and this gives us a broad perspective of the borough, and those areas in red are essentially where we see the greatest number of vulnerable residents who have sensitivity to heat. But it is broad, so what we want to do is overlay different variables together. The first thing we did was take the top 10 worst ranked neighbourhoods. This gives us a sense of which areas are particularly acute in terms of the populations most at risk. When we overlay that with the satellite data that looks at how hot it actually gets, we can see that there are some areas in, say, the west of the borough and also in Feltham where we would almost say that they are double disadvantaged because there's a high concentration of people who are sensitive to heat living in buildings that are not particularly resilient to heat as well. We wanted to map then the relief in Hounslow. So what are the assets that are available to residents for them to actually find respite? So we've looked at both the mitigation side of the picture, so that's looking at our green spaces, looking at areas which have low surface temperatures during the summer periods. More often than not, those coincide with where our blue spaces are. And then we wanted to look at the adaptation. So these are community assets that people could access and whether those are accessible as well to our disabled residents. So we created our third map. This is the heat relief map, and there's a lot of detail there. But what was great about this map was that it was accessible to the public during the summer. So a resident could easily sort of go in and type their address, and they would be able to find their nearest water refill station, their nearest cool space, their nearest cool zone, if we look at the green space and the low surface temperatures. What's also great about this map is that we use this to target our communications. So we got 3 new cool spaces that were set up in proximity to those high-risk neighborhoods that we had identified originally.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got our data, and now we're actually pushing residents to go and use these green spaces. But how do we know that these green spaces are actually providing the benefit that they're supposed to do? To do that, what we looked at is the resilience of it, and we started at a borough level. We're actually an extremely green borough. I don't know if you've ever been to Hounslow. It might not appear so when you're there. But it is the 3rd greenest borough in London. It's got about 15.68 million square metres of openly accessible green space. Like most boroughs, we actually don't have a touring field ecologist. That's kind of common across London. So we don't have that on-the-ground data that's replenishing itself. And we do know that quite a lot of our green spaces are not really providing that holistic benefit that we just talked about. So we looked at the whole borough, and then we started to zone it down. One of those areas that we zoned was Felt Marina. So we've got this large open green space, but it's directly next to this zone that's incredibly heat stressed. So it's obviously not providing any of that permeable benefits. It's not really accessing the community. It's got a lot of good features. It's got a river that runs directly through. That's the Longford River. Unfortunately, we're not actually allowed to use that. It's under a covenant from Royal Park, so we can't adjust that at all. We can't use it. And we've also got quite a lot of amenity grassland there, so that's areas for play pitches, it's areas for events, and we do need to keep those in place. They are very well used by the community. What most of them look like is this. So this is a normal grassland. This is a perfect example of the exact type of grass that we want. It's actually commenting on the grass outside in the pitch, in that we don't want perfectly green grass. That's because of something called the albedo effect. So the albedo effect is the reflectivity measure of a surface. So green grass actually has lower albedo, so that it's absorbing more of that heat. It's actually heating up the environment. You want a slightly bleached grass, because then it does have a higher albedo, so a higher reflective index. And you can imagine things like that. I've never been skiing, but if any of you have been skiing, that's actually what you're feeling in the snow. You're feeling a lot of that albedo, that immediate reflective, that heat coming off of it. So we want to keep it in this state, because if you let it go too far, then the soil actually shows, and then you get a very low albedo. A very low albedo. You start to absorb a lot of that heat, and then inevitably it sets on fire, which it does every single year. We're seeing more and more wildfires. We've actually already seen 5 this year. Fairly big ones, stopped Heathrow in multiple days. So we want to keep it in that middle zone, and it was like, how do we do that? And we actually use nature-based solutions. So we use something called the Miyawaki method of planting. So this is a method that was pioneered in Japan. It's where you plant a lot of different species of trees in very close proximity. In our zone here, we planted around 5,000 trees. They're entirely planted by volunteers, so everyone you see at the bottom was a member of the community that actually volunteered to come down and spend the day planting. We're also utilising our microclimates that are there on site. So we've got these tower blocks, which you can see. They're actually going to drive anabatic and kind of catabonic winds. So these are winds that come off of a tall surface, normally off of a mountain slope, but they do occur in an urban setting. You can tell if they've occurred because you'll see birds and other things using the thermals to raise higher up. But we're actually bothered about the not hot air, we're on about the cold air. What we want to do off of this is use the cold air to drive over the Longford River, over our forest, which has a lot of evapotranspiration, which is water that's been drawn up, and then it pushes it across our grassland, so it's keeping it at this perfect albedo. It's not turning it green, and we don't have to water it, but it's also not allowing it to burn and to set on fire. It also relieves, obviously, a lot of the stress that the residents feel then as well with this slightly cool air. Another way that we've used the heat map, this is the River Crane Valley. It's a very big river catchment that goes through West London. Starts up in Harrow, comes through Hillingdon, Ealing, Hounslow, Richmond. Our partners there are actually reintroducing the water vole. This is an endangered species in the UK. Richmond has just done a very big release. It's not a rat. It does look like a rat. It is a rodent, but it's not a rat. If you've ever read Wind in the Willows, Ratty is also not a rat. He's a water vole. They make a very cute noise. They are very cute. Yeah, completely endangered, and they're a very powerful engineer species, so they're really keeping the riverbanks in quite a good condition. They've been driven to near extinction through invasive predation, but also through a lack of their habitat, which is really from human encroachment. So what you actually need to do here is quite the opposite to what we've done in the Miyawaki forest, in that you need to remove quite a lot of trees and allow the sunlight to permeate, and then allow that for the water vole habitat. What that looks like is these ecological plans. So this is a section of the River Crane. All of the dots that you see, these are where we are set to remove trees. They're the ones on the left. All of the blue and orange dots. And then on the right, we have our heat maps. So if you look at this one, we've got an area that you probably don't want to remove a lot of trees from. There's quite a lot of heat stress there. And we've got the cool zone in the middle, but yeah, you probably don't want to remove trees there. And then we've got a second section, which is further down in Brazil Mill. We've got a lot of trees to be removed there, and we don't have a lot of heat stress. So you could probably get away with some trees being removed there, which is one of the common mistakes that people always make with this kind of data, in that it's actually reversed. On the left, you see an area that's already being heat stressed. It's already feeling a lot of that vulnerability. Whereas on the right, we've got an area that is relatively untouched by heat, so we don't want to remove a lot of the trees there and all of a sudden create a heat problem where there isn't one. You add another layer, which is local knowledge of officers, and you actually look at the one on the left and we realize this is mainly a logistic zone. We've got very few residents there. All of these logistic zones, they're completely cooled. And we wouldn't actually get anywhere near causing stress there, because it's basically at its carrying capacity for heat already. It's extremely hot. Whereas on the right, we have a neighbourhood that's an area of deprivation. So really bringing in any heat stress here would have actually quite harsh consequences. We've also got rough sleepers here. So please, if you're looking at data like this, do not fall into that trap. Make sure you're actually doing things sensitively. And when we do things sensitively, we get something that looks like this. This is further down the Crane Valley. This is actually the very bottom of our borough. This is our Richmond boundary. We do have some red here still, because I don't think you're ever going to get somewhere where it's fully removed. But what we've got is all of this area where that isn't feeling heat stress, and that's because of some of that permeation of the blue and the green zone working in tandem, really cooling down those areas, and people can access this as very high quality green and blue space. And it's about being sensitive, because if you think about 1 or 2 trees being removed, or 1 or 2 square meters of work or intervention, then it might not seem like anything big, but if you scale that up to 15.68 million square meters, these can have actually really quite deep and quite harmful consequences, so please do think about it.
So what's next for Hounslow? Well, we're using these maps to really springboard a couple of future projects, which we just wanted to highlight. The first being extending those nature-based solutions to our SUDS scheme, so that's looking at specific streets where we want to put specific SUDS so that the heat risk is lowered, particularly in those neighbourhoods where we know they are at heat stress already. Second, we're using these maps to connect it to live Met Office data. That means that our emergency teams during a heat wave are able to get sort of a pre-filtered view of some of the sites or areas that are most at risk, looking at, say, rough sleeper sites or nurseries, care homes, for instance. Third, we want to model how this risk will change over the next decade. We know that heat waves are only likely to be more intense and to be more frequent, say in 2035, and our population is aging. So that cohort of what we had was vulnerable residents is only likely to grow in the future, so it would be interesting to see how this morphs as the climate continues to change and break down. And lastly, we're bringing all of this together in our first climate change resilience plan. So this is a holistic strategy that we have committed to, which really sets us on a path to becoming more climate resilient borough, which really, for us as a council, we're quite proud of, because it means when the next heat wave does come, we will be in a better position to protect our communities, but also to protect our green spaces. Thank you very much.
So thanks, Yusuf. Thanks, Josh. That was an amazing example of detailed analysis in ArcGIS. What we want to do now is broaden that out a little bit more and talk to you about the wider capabilities of creating and sharing insight with ArcGIS. I'm Dave, and I'm joined by my colleague, Iskren. So when I'm working on projects at Esri UK, they all pretty much have the same process. I gather data together, I analyze and visualize that to gain new insight. I then share that with colleagues or partners so they can benefit from my work. What we're going to talk about today is those last two sections because they're really important. I'm going to discuss analysis for the first few minutes before handing over to Iskren. And we're going to touch on ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Online. It's a very short session, so we're not going to cover everything, but hopefully it gives you a flavor for what's possible with these two great tools. And I'm going to do a quick demo, and then we're going to talk about some of my thoughts on the benefits of each. Now, at the moment, there's 3 different user types that have access to all of this capability. But for today, we're exclusively going to be looking at the creator user type. And the reason we're doing that is because when the user type changes happened last year, Creator got access to Pro for the first time. And so we really, for all of you out there who are currently Creator users, if you're not using Pro already, then hopefully this session will give you a little bit of inspiration about what's possible. For those of you that are already comfortable with Pro, then hopefully the stuff around online and some of the sharing capabilities will also give you a bit more experience. So for my demo, I'm going to be a retail estate manager looking for a new site in Leeds. I want to profile the various areas across Leeds based on the competition and the demographic profile of those communities. In effect, I'm doing a very simplified version of what Co-op was talking about this morning, so hopefully you've all got a flavour of what's possible. Now I'm going to start off in ArcGIS Online, and I've only got a couple of data sets. So we've got wards, which are going to act as the locations we want to profile. And then I brought in some geolytics retail points, which have come in from the Living Atlas. So these are readily available for all of you, which gives me an understanding of the competition I've got in each of these key locations. I'm then going to use an online enrichment service to provide the demographic information to finish off that profiling. Now, within the web map environment, if you want to do analysis, it's available over here on the right-hand side. As a creator, I've only got access to a couple of things here. I can access the tools or the history. If you've got a slightly higher license level, then you'll also see Model Builder, raster analysis will also be here. But for today, we are talking about creator. To use the tools is very simple. I go to the tools panel where I can either manually navigate through all the different toolboxes, or absolutely the best way is just to search by using a keyword, and that's going to return all the results that conform to that. Now, the tools in online take about 30 seconds to run, so in the interest of time, I've already run these so that I've got them ready to go. But what I want to show you is we've got the Summarize Within tool, and what this allows me to do is it's joining the wards with those retail points. We get a profile of the competition in each location. And then I'm going to run the enrich layer against that output, which is going to add in the demographic profile. So we have an enrichment tool that's part of ArcGIS Online, and that enables you to choose from a variety of different demographic factors that you might want to include in your analysis. On this occasion, I've included things like how much money people have for clothing, food and beverages. I'm also wanting a population breakdown, and some information about purchasing power. So some really interesting data sets to help us understand that community. Now, before I run anything, it's always important to use the estimate credits option at the bottom. Now, this analysis is going to cost me less than 2, so it's hardly anything. But the reason I suggest doing this is because we've all made mistakes. And you accidentally run this against a national data set, and suddenly you go, oh no, what have I done? So just check before you run this. Good credit management across your organization is also really important. So when I run those two tools, the output we get looks very much like this. So it's giving me a profile of the different competition across the sector, and I can see information about the community and information about who's the major retailer, what other sites are available. So a really interesting data set that I could then use to share with my colleagues, which Iskren's going to touch on in a moment. Before we do that, let's dig into Pro. Now, for those of you that not use Pro is our comprehensive analytical tool that's going to give you the capability to do pretty much anything you like. But because of that, when you look at the interface, it is a little bit more daunting. But we quite often think of it like Excel. I think all of us here use Excel. We're comfortable using Excel. When you look at it, that's got hundreds of tools. But you don't need to know them all. You just need to know the 3 or 4 that are going to complete your workflow. So for this analysis, I'm actually only going to run 2 tools, the same as we showed before. I've got exactly the same data. I'm going to go to my geoprocessing toolbox, where, as before, I can manually navigate through all the different toolboxes, or I can just use a keyword search to bring back the results I'm interested in. So very similar sort of capability as we would expect from online. As before, I have cheated a little bit, and I've already run this, so I've got the history here, which gives me a record of all the tools I've run previously in this session. So I want to run summarized instant count. That's creating that join between wards and the retail locations. And this only takes a couple of seconds because we're running it locally, so I can run this live. And that's adding in this wards profile that's going to help me understand the distribution of competitors. So we can see a breakdown of all the different competition here. And then I'm going to run the enrichment tool, which is going to add that demographic information. Now, one of the key differences between Pro and online is the fact that most of the tools in Pro you can run as much as you like. So you can run them for a variety of different scenarios, you can do lots of testing, none of it's going to cost you additional credits. However, there are a few that do make the most of online services, and the enrichment tool is a good example of that, and it's always going to warn you of this. So if you look at the top here, it's saying this tool is using online services, but it's going to use credits. So please, can you estimate that? In fact, if I try and run this now, it's not going to let me. It says, come on, I've warned you, can you please estimate the credits just to make sure everything's fine? So if I estimate credits, as before, it's only a couple, and then it's going to allow me to run that service to produce our new outputs. So this, again, only takes a couple of seconds, adds it into my map, and we've now got a data set that's giving us the profile of the competition, as well as the demographic information that profiles our community. So a really great data set that we can use to share. Now, the other difference between Pro and online is this data is all sitting locally for me at the moment. So if I want to share it with colleagues or partners, I would then need to publish it up to the online environment. To do that, I can go to my share menu here, and very quickly I just choose web layer, publish web layer, and I'm not going to run through the process now, but that would publish it up to your online environment, and then you can create maps and apps much the same as you would in any other environment. So hopefully that's given you a quick feel for the capabilities of online and Pro. But before I hand over to Iskren, let's just recap that. So Pro really is the comprehensive analytical tool. It provides so many possibilities. And for me personally, this is where I do the vast majority of my analysis. Because I can run scenarios, I can test use cases, I can try as much as I like until I get to that final result, at which point I would then publish it online for the sharing process. Online is a little bit more limited, but is much easier to use. And once you finish the analysis, it's immediately ready to share, so you don't have that publication process. So hopefully that's given you a quick feel for what's possible with those 2 tools. I'm now going to hand over to Iskren, who's going to talk a little bit more about sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So what Dave's just done is uncover patterns in the retail landscape around our potential competitors and our target population. But you'll probably agree, insight on its own, or analysis on its own, can be rather limited. It's when you publish those patterns that they actually turn into action. So the question now becomes, how do we effectively and appropriately share them with the right people? This is where ArcGIS Online's app builders come in. Each one's designed for a different audience and a different style of storytelling. So let's start with ArcGIS Story Maps. At its core, this app builder is all about the narrative. It brings together your maps, text, images, and multimedia together into a structured story that can help the readers understand the analysis in a clear, linear way. Notably, it's designed to assume no GIS expertise through building blocks like immersive map tools and image galleries. And with the recent addition of story map frames, we can now also craft mobile-first short-form stories too, reflecting how our audiences are increasingly consuming information. And so overall, this app builder is great if you need to tell the story behind your data and to run through the analysis step by step. Now, if story maps is about telling the story, dashboard sits at the opposite end of the communication spectrum. It brings your maps, charts, and indicators together into a single view so that the audience can understand the analysis at a glance, whether it's live or static. But what really makes dashboards stand out is the way all the widgets can be linked to the map, so that as you pan and filter your map, you always see exactly what you're looking at or your area of interest. So you choose this app builder when the goal is, when the priority is clarity and immediate situational awareness. That said, not every question can be answered by simply reading a narrative by scanning a dashboard. Sometimes the audience needs to actually use the data and analysis, and that's where Experience Builder comes in. It lets you create fully customized web applications using a range of customizable widgets to create anything from a simple data explorer to a multi-page experience with dedicated views and tools like you see on screen. So what really sets this app builder apart from the other two is the level of control that you have over the user journey, as it allows you to integrate tool-driven workflows, allowing you to integrate analysis, usability, rather than just consuming it. Though, let's say you want something simpler and easier to configure, then ArcGIS Instant Apps can also be a great fit, as it offers a library of specialized templates that provide focused tools with minimal setup, albeit with far less configuration freedom than Experience Builder. Though crucially, the guided templates walk you through the app creation process, allowing you to create an app in literal minutes or instantly. This makes it ideal for quick turnaround projects while still supporting tool-driven workflows. And finally, that brings us to Report Builder for ArcGIS. Developed by Esri UK and made available as an add-on to a regular user license, this app builder aims to fill a clear gap: the ability to produce formal, repeatable, analytically driven reports, something that the other app builders are simply not designed for. So let me show you an example of a report I made earlier using the analysis from Dave. What you see on screen is the report for Only. It takes the analysis and lays it out using a set of charts, infographics, and tables, creating a structured publication-ready report ready to print. And when we're looking at Only here, this is only one of many reports that can be generated with my Report Builder app. If I flick over to the index page, which is what you first see when you go onto our app, we can see all of the features in our data set here. And that's because behind the scenes, you essentially design one master template using a range of widgets and dynamic text. And then Report Builder is able to pull in the relevant fields for each feature to generate a personalized version of the report. So let me show you how easily you can start building a report from scratch. When you first open Report Builder, you will be welcomed by the home page, where you can select New Report. From there, you navigate to your data and select Choose. You'll then choose a field to help identify each of your features, and that will open a fresh, clean template for you to build on. Just like in Experience Builder, you drag and drop widgets from the left-hand panel. So I'm going to have a title, I'm going to drag in a text box, and I'm going to have a bar chart widget for my bar chart. Selecting the widget will allow you to edit it, like so. Report 4, and I'm going to bring in some dynamic text so that we know exactly which feature this report belongs to. I'm going to highlight it, make it center, bold, and increase the font size. Now looking at our bar chart, we can see that some fields have already been chosen for us. Selecting the widget will open the Data and Settings tab on the right-hand side. In Data, we can select a few more fields so that I can understand the retail landscape a bit better. Though personally, I find it a bit difficult to see this blue, so I'm going to go into the settings where I can edit the bar chart itself. In bars, I'll increase the size, and then I'm going to make the blue a bit darker as well. When I click apply, we can see the change. From here, you can also edit the axes, legend, or even titles. With a bit more time, you can populate your report with the range of widgets available, including clear dividers and sectioning like I have done, or even extra pages. And so, when you've created your report, you can save and publish, and that will allow you to create a report for each of your features in your dataset. And so, in summary, ArcGIS enables you to create insight and amplify its value by sharing it effectively. Using a creator license, today Dave analyzed and enriched retail data to find patterns, and then I took those patterns and I shared them through different app builders within ArcGIS Online to support real decision making. As a little side note, if you'd like to explore app builders further, we recommend you have a look at our Esri UK map gallery and report builder gallery for further inspiration. And so ultimately, ArcGIS brings vital analysis together with effective sharing so that insight does not remain simply in a tool, but reaches the people that need to act on it. Thank you very much.